Okay, so I'm curious about this video. Somebody sent it to me in the Discord, I believe, somewhere. Maybe they, no, whatever. Anyway, it's called "Why the 4-Day Work Week May Be Closer and Scarier Than You Think," and I'm curious because it's a little bit more of like a more political discussion, or really a societal discussion about how we're probably gravitating towards like those 4-day work weeks. We have technology that makes things more efficient, which means we're probably going to need less work hours in general. Here's the way that I envision society in some capacity. My more ideal society is we reform welfare, which I think has like the very negative impact of making it so that people can't work, right? If you're on welfare, they're like, well, if you make too much money, you lose your welfare. Very hard to get back onto it. I think it creates like a lot of, not a great culture, right? So with technology displacing jobs and driving down wages and putting people in positions where they have to go onto welfare, I think it would be a great idea to take some of that money and redistribute it in a better way. I was a big fan of Andrew Yang's universal basic income, where everybody gets $1,000 a month. Obviously, the caveat to that is you would phase out traditional welfare programs, right? So it's not like you get welfare plus that. But I'm leaning more towards like a negative income tax where like you get more money the less money that you would make, right? So for instance, let's say if you made no money, you got $1,000 a month. If you got a job where you made an extra $1,000 a month, maybe instead you get like $800 a month, right? That's how it makes sense to me. It's very conditional, or it's not as conditional. You don't like lose it or gain it and have to go through like a whole like paperwork progress or process. You can get on and off of it very easy. If you make less money, you're able to get like hit with that, what would you call it, like that safety net, and you'd be able to go back up. As far as paying for it, like you actually can pay for it with the mixture of like a value-added tax, the phasing out of traditional welfare, the reduction in cost of healthcare because people have money to be able to take care of their shit, the amount of money that's going to go through the economy because if people are getting additional money through some kind of like universal basic income, they're going to, a lot of people are going to spend it on things like going out, which helps the economy, fixing up your car, a lot of other things as well, right? So the concept of a 4-day work week makes sense to me. I think as technology should make all of our lives easier, not just rich people's lives easier. I don't think it's a bad idea to implement something that would benefit us all in some capacity. I've done more in-depth videos on UBI. You could look up popular UBI if you're really that interested. And so like I think it's cool. It's a cool idea to do something like this, plus with technology making some jobs, a lot of jobs easier and more efficient. You don't need to work a 40-hour work week anymore. I think there's nothing wrong with changing the flow, especially since I think statistically a lot of people only work like half of their work day and the other half they're just kind of sitting around, So yeah, let's go.
So in the last couple of days, the results of the world's largest trial of
This is by Kidology, by the way.
4-day work week have been released. And this was truly spectacular. It involved 61 companies, over 2,900 employees and staff, as well as 2 full months of preparation. Now, what was exceptional about this trial was that, firstly, pay had to be maintained at 100%. And secondly, the companies were able to diversify how they employed and implemented their 4-day work week. There was the classic Friday off model, the staggered model, the decentralized model, the annualized model, as well as conditional structures. For instance, if you don't complete your
that like if you don't complete your workload, I think that's an interesting structure because for people who can complete their workload earlier, it can be an incentive for them to get it done sooner and more effectively. The potential problem with that, though, is it can also mean that people will rush through their jobs and finish it too soon or at like a lower quality, which of course could always exist there. But that's why you would need like decent some kind of like oversight or some kind of managerial thing to make sure that everything was getting done in a timely fashion. But yeah.
Or work or the agreed upon amount of work in the 4 days, then you don't get 4 days off. But what was most interesting and unique to see was that those conducting the trial wanted to emphasize and prioritize seeing if employees themselves exhibited a meaningful reduction in work time. Each company designed a policy tailored to its particular industry, organizational challenges, departmental structures, and work culture. And let me tell you, contrary to popular belief, as well as based on my own very low expectations, the results were truly shocking. This was a fully fledged success, well and truly successful. In fact, the trial was such a resounding success that of the 61 companies that partook, 56 of them are going to continue with the trial, that is with the 4-day work week, with 18 of them confirming that they are actually going to implement these changes permanently. It was also found that over 70% of employees had reduced levels of burnout. Likewise, levels of...
That makes sense. I mean, it gives you something to look forward to. There's something that can be, well, here's the problem, because there's something that can be very obviously it'd be cool if you just finish your work and go home. And like, let's say you did all your work correctly and you finished and went home. Like, obviously, it's like, yeah, awesome. I got everything. Because I used to work for a company that would do resets for other companies. So this company, I would go to like Stop and Shops, Walmart's, Pathmarks, A&P stores, and I would do resets for the company. And we were told that, or it depended on the boss, but basically when you were done, you go home, you get paid the same amount. And it was a pretty good thing. You know, the days were, I believe, 7-hour work days, but sometimes we would finish them in like 4. You'd have a higher or lower workload. And it kind of makes sense because they're getting paid per reset, not per hour that we work. Right. And so that was cool. You'd finish and then you get out. It was really nice. I always enjoyed it. It made you want to finish sooner. It made you want to like get everything done. And it made you want, like, for the people who worked harder and were faster, like myself, like it made us more willing to subsidize the slower older people's, you know, work progress. God bless them. I never resented them, you know. I wonder though, because I never had an issue with ever feeling like, I wonder if it's like a temporary mental thing where it's like you get to a certain point. No, I don't think so. I was gonna be like, what happens if you get to like initially going from 40 hours to like a limit, like fewer hours? You'd be so excited that you'd finish quickly. Would that excitement fade? Like, no way, because you're still getting that incentive of leaving. So,
of anxiety, fatigue, and sleep issues decreased, while mental and physical health both improved. And so what of companies' revenue, you may ask? Well, interestingly enough, revenue stayed pretty stable or increased. Companies' revenue rose by 1.4% on average. And probably most importantly, and also quite unique to the modern workforce and the gig economy that we find ourselves in, employees' turnover rate decreased by 57%.
Wow.
15% of employees said that no amount
57%. That's interesting. Turnover rate's just like how fast they leave and come back. That's incredible. I wonder if we had a society that normalized this behavior, though, like if people would value it as much. But that's awesome.
Of money would induce them to accept a 5-day schedule over the 4-day week to which they were now accustomed. So what is my evaluation of this? Well, I think my evaluation is typically going to be quite positive, but I think that there are some negatives that need to be considered and that were not considered, at least not in the data that was published recently. Firstly, this trial was truly exceptional. It was exceptional in that it was a coordinated social, cultural, business, private and public effort. In terms of implementing something meaningful for people, for the majority of people, this was exceptional. And this was so important, I think.
The one thing is that when you have a business that has a particular workload that you can finish up and go home, this works really well. But let's say you're like, I don't think that you could necessarily do this at like a McDonald's. That might be a little bit more of a problem. Because you're kind of there to take care of customers. And that's why I talked before about some kind of like subsidizing income so that you can make that possible. But like you couldn't really do that. Like my wife probably couldn't do that because part of her job is to help take care of people, you know. So it's a cool benefit though to start implementing. I still think it's pretty good.
Just for the morale of everyday people, for the morale of where our workforce and society can move toward. This truly represented people over bureaucracy, because for too long, modern work and the modern workforce has been subsumed in bureaucratic reckoning with this management structure and organization of people and employees in a way that just does not make sense. If you question higher management, the answer is, well, because I say so. There is clearly a waste of talent, of skill, and of time because people are too scared to go against the bureaucratic mechanisms that make everything go in this sort of glacial pace toward profit. And I think the reason why people were able to come before bureaucracy in the implementation of this trial is because it was multinational, it was global, and it was something that was done in consensus with the whole, or at least a vast percentage of society and sectors. The 4-day workweek campaign is a campaign in the UK that has gone global, and over the past 2 years, it has done remarkable work. Unilever in New Zealand has implemented a 4-day workweek. Microsoft in Japan has done the same. The government in Valencia, Spain, has begun recruiting for its own pilot, a region-wide pilot. Extensive research has been conducted by...
When is this DLC coming to America? Not that I care, because I already... I mean, I work like a 6 or 7 day work week, but the amount of work is not particularly high. I'll say that. Okay.
think tanks such as the New Economics Forum, Women's Budget Group, and the Institute for Public Policy Research. The 10-minute rule bill in the UK is currently or has been discussed in the House of Commons, and the Scottish Government has also been promoting and been supportive of nationwide pilot schemes.
I just wonder how you'd be able to implement that more effectively. It's not a bad idea though. But like, okay, like we said, like for jobs where there's a quota, it makes sense to do something like this. But like when like a more of a menial labor job, like how do you do that like at a McDonald's? And then if you implement a law that forces this to happen, and let's say McDonald's now has to cut people from full-time to part-time, I just don't know how you would implement it with like a like a job that didn't require some kind of a, you understand what I'm saying. I just wonder, like, how would you be able to implement that? You'd have to, yeah, okay.
And I think this is working because there are so many intersecting institutions and interests with an incentive.
I'm just afraid that like when it comes to a job that may not be able to do it like this, implementing some kind of law might end up hurting the people who are employed, by not allowing them to work as much without like getting the benefit of being able to get paid the same. You know what I mean?
An incentive to see this work and an incentive to actually prove and demonstrate that a 4-day work week can actually be just as, if not more, productive and profitable than our current system. And this is encouraging, especially considering that productivity and skilled labor are down.
Well, what I'm saying is that you'd have to have more people that work on like a more part-time basis. But then if they're not getting their paycheck subsidized, because it makes sense for a quota job to do 4-day work weeks, then like they would just get paid less overall. That's why you'd have to implement some kind of like a UBI alongside the structure of that.
And also considering the Great Resignation, people being very much disenchanted with work, a changing mentality and psychology around work, at least since the lockdowns. It was especially interesting to see in the implementation of the world's largest ever trial of the 4-day work week, not just why a 4-day work week is a good idea and can be effective, but even more importantly, how to actually implement it. And the data was extensive. It wasn't just quantitative, that is based on administrative, business-focused data, such as the key metrics of how effective something was, the key metrics of money and finance and how much was made, but also a focus on people. What I also liked was seeing the emphasis on looking at the perspectives from the shop floor, that is employee-focused data. Throughout this trial, extensive qualitative interviews were held. And these interviews were not just with managers and CEOs, but with workers themselves. Overall, the confidence and the fortitude of this study is what is most commendable. And I think this effectively shows that when the interests of a business and their employees are aligned, when there is actual dialogue and communication between them, shit can get done. And now onto the things that I'm not so optimistic about. In reading the findings, which were published by one of the main researchers into this trial, Autonomy, a research organization focused on the future of work, especially in advanced economies, the emphasis all around was in enhancing productivity. And I think this points to something that wasn't...
Okay, I get what they're going to say. Like, yeah, I was thinking that the only reason that they would want to implement this is because it's good for productivity and it's good, like it's overall good for that. And so I guess the argument would be like a capitalist argument where it's like it's not necessarily centralized around the human experience, it's more centralized around if it's better for business, right? So it's like, yeah, people are feeling better and they're having better outcomes. We don't really care that they're feeling better. We just care about the better outcomes. And so maybe that's going to be the criticism. I don't think it necessarily matters. I mean, like work is still like a necessity. It's always good when you can prove that having a more positive human experience can like increase the outcomes at work.
Raised, of course, in the results and in the findings of this trial, but that is quite present and quite topical, namely biotechnology and AI featuring more heavily in our everyday lives and in the workplace. Alongside the growing awareness and advocacy for the 4-day work week, technology that is highly invasive is emerging alongside these changes. Earpods to tell whether a person is paying attention or whether their mind is wandering are already being employed in some businesses.
9 out of 10 employees waste time during the workday. They focus on other things.
Yeah, right. Is that crazy? I know what technology she's talking about. There's different technologies like eye tracking and shit that make sure you're actually doing your work. But you wouldn't really need these if you had that incentive to be able to go home early, right? That would be one of those benefits to that, is you wouldn't really need to invest in these technologies to make sure people are maintaining their level of productiveness, because as long as they're getting their work done, it wouldn't really matter. So
there may be good reasons why we want to be able to find better ways to monitor whether somebody is paying attention, or they're doing something different. The newest way to monitor attention is through a device like this one. These are ear pods that are launching later this year. These ear pods, much like the video you watched earlier, are ear pods that can pick up brainwave activity and tell whether or not a person is paying attention or their mind is wandering.
How the fuck do you pick up brainwave activity through the ear? Oh my god! Thank God I got nothing going on in my fucking brain because they could never use that on me. Holy moly! Imagine me wearing this when I do this. Sometimes people are like, "You weren't paying attention to the video," and I was. You're dumb. But imagine if I wasn't and I didn't realize it. Oh, it'd be crazy. Maybe I should get one of those. This is like a meme. It's like those guys that look at the girls, like the eye tracking stuff. You know what I'm talking about? It'd be kind of like that. It might be kind of funny, actually.
Okay, well, you might think, fine. But even if we can tell whether a person is paying attention or their mind is wandering, you can't tell what they're paying attention to.
Oh,
you would be wrong. Turns out that you can not only tell whether a person is paying attention or their mind is wandering, but you can discriminate between the kinds of things that they're paying attention to. Whether they're doing something like central tasks.
No, don't do that. Because you imagine being in a meeting and your boss is like a solid fucking like 8 out of 10, dude. You know what I mean? And they use this technology like he's paying attention. And it's like, oh, but he's looking at her tits. Oh, dude. This is what I mean. This is how the world, the society is oppressive to men. I can't help what I'm looking at, dude. Oh shit. We're fucked, dude.
Like programming, peripheral tasks like writing documentation, or unrelated tasks like surfing social media or online browsing. When you combine brainwave activity together with other forms of software and surveillance technology, the power becomes quite precise. So what do we do with this? What do we do with technology that enables us to use brainwave activity for attention? Do we embrace it? Do we resist it?
Throw it away.
I believe that there is a pathway forward with such technology, but it's putting it in the hands of employees, enabling them to use it for themselves as a choice, whether or not they want to focus, whether or not they want the technology in order to improve their own performance, but not using it as a measure of their brain metrics to decide whether to fire them, hire them, or to watch for their lagging cognitive decline over time and using it as a way to discriminate against them.
This can all be bracketed as surveillance of productivity that is becoming a reality very quickly. And all of this makes me wonder if this is merely a trade-off. In short, the trade-off being, we now only need you for 4 days because we have found very inventive and very invasive ways of monitoring, quite literally, your productivity. And based on the diversity of options which companies could have for introducing a 4-day work week, many companies, I'm quite sure, will implement this based on conditionality, an agreed level of productivity that has to be met. And who knows if the bar for productivity will remain stable and consistent. If there is ultimately more money to be made, well, who knows?
That makes sense. Okay, that's actually a really good point. So what she's saying is that like right now, you work a 40-hour work week, you have a particular amount of work that needs to get done. But what happens if like they increase the amount of work that you have to get done, which just results in going back to work for that like a level of time anyway. And then you can take it another step further. And if you're on some kind of like a conditional basis, or you're on some kind of like a basis where you work based on getting your job done, does it then, and they overload you and you end up working more hours, do you end up like getting like, you know what I mean? Because I remember, do you end up getting screwed for that? Because I remember for like a very limited time, I worked for a truck driving company, right? Where I drove a 28-foot box truck, and I quit like in a day. It was horrible. And I'll tell you why. They sold it as like some days you're going to work like longer hours, some days you're going to work shorter hours. So you're going to have days where you might work like a little over, like, oh, you know, you might work a little bit over like 8 hours, you know, and there's going to be days where you may only work like 5 hours. And it's like, okay, cool. And so you get paid the same, but you get to get in, get out, and go home. It's like, okay. First day I worked there, I worked with somebody and it was a 14-hour workday. I was like, this is insane. Like they completely misrepresented it. And the sheet even said it would be like a 10-hour workday or a 12-hour workday. So they gave me a piece of paper that said I had like, it's just how far, like, does it end up going into like that perspective? Because that's insane. You know what I mean? And then how do you function with like overtime laws at that point, you know? And then you know what I mean? I'm just saying like, that's a possibility of something going on there. You know, what's stopping them from hiring fewer workers or like firing some people since you don't need so many, you know, or using this information to be like, oh, we don't need as many people. That's the potential. I still think we should work towards those work weeks. But then that's almost like a cultural shift of being like, okay, we should just like, that's going to be a cultural shift, I think, really, when it boils down to it, is getting into the habit of having fewer work weeks or having a lower expectation of people for a particular amount of time in a work week. Because right now we definitely have a work culture of like 40 hours, which makes sense. I get it. But, but damn. Could you imagine? You start getting punished? That'd be fucking crazy. It makes sense when you get a particular amount of money to do a particular job in a more like contractual area. Like let's say that you're a really good artist and you're like, I can get this. I remember seeing a TikTok about it. And you're like, I can get this piece of, I can get you like the art that you need in like 10 hours. And somebody's like, oh, okay, well then I'm only going to pay you for 10 hours. Like, well, no, I'm really good at my job and I get to you efficiently. So like, you're going to still pay me. You know what I mean? Whereas somebody might be able to do it in 20 hours for like less money, but is it going to be as good? And then it gets into that whole conversation. But that's into like higher skilled labor jobs. I wonder how that would manifest in like lower skilled labor jobs,
Demographic critiques.
I make the best hamburgers
Firstly,
at
I thought
McDonald's.
It was interesting that 68% of participants had an undergraduate degree or higher. Now, I think this is important considering that roughly 87% of the UK population do not have a bachelor's degree. The industries that partook in this pilot were all high-skilled industries. Industries dominated by the private sector. And in line with this, 66% of the companies who partook in the pilot had 25 employees or less. I think it is very likely that the success of this trial is due to the fact that it was kept within a very particular demographic, a very particular skill set, a very particular section of the market. There also wasn't a lot of diversity, not just racially. 90% of those who partook in this pilot were white, but also in terms of family types. 70% were married or cohabiting, and 52% of them had a child. When it comes to the increase in single-person households, when it comes to the fact that a lot of younger generations are not having children or having children a lot later, it's not terribly representative of the diversity of the modern labor force. I think what we will potentially...
Yeah, for sure. But that's unfortunately how like all things work, like I was saying before, like it starts with like the people who are already that could benefit from it the least, almost, not that they, of course, you're gonna benefit like somebody, but yeah, like I said, you can't really do this for like low skilled labor jobs. So
eventually see with the potential implementation of the 4-day work week is that it will primarily focus around and be the privilege of, the privileged people who work in high skilled industries and sectors.
It's kind of like how in America, there's like Juneteenth is a holiday now, at least in some companies. I don't know like the specifics on every company, but it's recognized as like a holiday. But the people who are getting off on that holiday, which is supposed to basically celebrate like Black, history and shit, I should probably are usually people in managerial positions, which are generally disproportionately white. So then you have like white people that are getting off on a Black holiday, and then you have Black people that are still working on it. It gets like it's a little silly. Okay, I worked for the IRS after our probationary period, and based on our preference, along with the accuracy of our work, we could put in for a 410s work week. Yeah, that's still 40 hours. I think the part of this isn't just a 4-day work week. It's like a 4-day work week that's not 40 hours. That's the whole conversation here. But I understand what you're saying. That might be better too. I feel like people might respond better to 410s than 5/8s. But thank you so much for the medium gut. And like, yeah, I actually saw the menu a while ago. It was pretty good.
Who have a bachelor's degree or higher, who have a partner and children, who work in small, closely knit communities and sectors, in small businesses where there can be a focus on individuality, on creating a viable work-life balance. And so, yes, I do see this as something that could potentially be incredibly positive. But
but that's another conversation, is about like reducing monopolies, right? Because I don't know. I feel like okay. I think one of the things that we're kind of getting at is that it could be difficult for a bigger business to incorporate something like this. And that might be true. But then it's a conversation around how like we do kind of have like a lot of very powerful monopolies. I mean, look at things like Walmart. I mean, you wouldn't call them direct monopolies, but they're huge businesses. And they have the money to, for instance, invest heavily into technology to reduce their own labor. And it makes them very competitive because when you use like a lot of technology instead of people, you don't have to pay for a lot of different costs, right? Like upfront, it's more money because it's more technology, but like you don't have to pay for health insurance. You don't have to pay wages, So you might, and like if you look at the Walmart that I've been going to, there aren't any more like non-self checkouts. everything is a self-checkout, and they have people that like watch the store and monitor and stuff. But like there's fewer and fewer people working there. And so if you're a smaller mom and pop store, there's really no way that you could ever compete with that. And so it gets into this conversation about, I know I'm going off on a little bit of a tangent, but then you get into this whole conversation about like, okay, well, how do you make a sustainable business model? Like smaller businesses that are more person-centered and want to help their workers, when you have such huge businesses that they have to compete with that don't give a fuck about their workers and are no problem taking advantage of the workers' labor. And then that gets in conversation again, I was talking about like a UBI or a negative income tax, where there's more money in the market, which gives you more money to be able to choose to go somewhere that might be a little bit more expensive. So the mom and pop store might be 10 or 20% more expensive. But if you're sitting with like an extra $1,000 a month into your pocket, you might be a little more focused on going, or more willing to go to a place that's a little bit more expensive. You know, maybe you wouldn't go to the Walmart. Maybe you go to the local mom and pop, or you go here. Maybe you wouldn't go to Applebee's. You'll go to, you know, Mamma Mia's or something like that, you know? But I feel like a lot of these bigger businesses that I would say take advantage of their workers by not paying them that well and do the most that they can to cut workers' benefits, you have to kind of go there because things are so expensive that, like, what else can you do? And so we have to solve that problem as well, I think.
I think, at least for now, it's definitely going to be something that a very small section of the modern population gets to enjoy to the fullest. But this most definitely gives me hope insofar as a sort of global initiative to make a real improvement to something that is really central to the lives of just everybody. And I think it gives me hope that education can be next. Modern public education is archaic and stuck in the industrial era. Its marketization and bureaucratic ineptitude has completely decimated creativity or lateral thinking. It fails more children than it benefits. It demotivates and is, in my opinion, rather a slap in the face.
Well, one of the reasons I think why schools are there for so long is because it's basically like a glorified daycare.
To really great teachers and educators. It would be interesting to see whether a 4-day school week could be implemented and what that would mean. Whether governments have...
Yeah, because I think that kids probably would respond better to like lower... First of all, I mean, I think it would make sense for kids to not have summer vacation. And before you start booing me, it'd be better to have a structure that allowed you like to go to school the entire year with a less burdened load and more vacation time in between. So rather than like a big 3-month spurt off, maybe you got off consistently like a certain amount of time every certain amount of period. I know that sounds so silly, but you know, what do you like? You know, maybe you get off 1 week every month, or you just something different, something a little bit different. No, where you go to school less instead of an 8-hour day. Maybe you go for like 4 or 5 hours. You don't have huge breaks, because when you get these big breaks in vacation, you forget everything. And then like the first month is just relearning everything you forgot. So doing like a year-round school would make a lot more sense. The problem is that like it's difficult for parents, because then like how do you pick up your kid? How do you drop them off? And then we get into another conversation about like some kind of daycare. And then we got this. But I think that kids would respond better to something like that. Because I couldn't imagine, like, that stuff's like I don't know, a whole day in school. It just seems like so much. And I feel like kids would respond much better to something like that. They would be upset because I said take away your thing, but you'd be better off. Plus, then your parents just got to pay for summer shit anyway, which is expensive as fuck. Everything's so expensive, you know? It's so expensive.
The incentive and the interest to try and implement something as risky as this. Unfortunately, I don't see the incentive as being there at the present time, but I think at least this can instigate conversation around it. The only real attempt so far at trying to confront the bureaucratic beast that is public education has been in France in the primary school sector. That is a 24-hour week with a half day on Wednesday, or in some cases, no school on Wednesday. But of course, with this, a lot of things would have to change. A lot of things that I don't think we are, as a society, at least ready to have conversations about. Most notably, examinations. But these findings most definitely surprised me. And it is...
I say most notably fucking basically daycare more than anything else.
Encouraging, and I think that this can be something quite encouraging for the direction and the future of modern work. But I'd be very interested to hear what you think about this. Are you optimistic about these changes, these potential changes, which seem to be taking at least the private sector and these particular industries in the UK by storm? Or are you a little bit more skeptical? Thank you so much for watching this video, and I'll see all of you very soon in the next one.
Okay, yeah, I like that video. It's very interesting.
I want Papa Gut to pee on my face, but just as a friend. There's nothing weird about that. I want him to pee on my face.